Oftentimes, if you ask someone why they did something, they could not give you a reason why. This can be in choosing between objects or evaluating certain situations. An example may be, okay, I'm going to ask someone, why did you buy that car? Or why are you marrying that woman? Some may be able to answer these questions, but not with their true internal reasoning. So today I'm covering the article Is Self-Awareness Mirage by David Brooks. In this article, he goes over this theory along with what self-awareness looks like, and he quotes some people um, in psychology, how they perceive self-awareness, and even the ways they suggest on improving it. There is reasoning as to why we are not self-aware. Um, as Brooks writes, we have a conscious self. We have a conscious self. Of course, the little voice in our head, but this conscious self has little access to the part of the brain that are the actual source of judgment, problem solving, and emotion. We know what we're feeling, just not how and why we got there. So, self awareness has nothing to do with, oh, you don't know what you're doing. No, it's simply that our conscious part of our brain, the part of our brain that's in charge of consciousness, and the part of our brain that's in charge of certain cognitive factors, they are hardly connected. So this is why there is trouble explaining why you may do something, why you did something, why you chose something, etc. Um, David Brooks feels quote, I don't like this finding. It hurts my sense of dignity. I like to think I, myself conscious, am in some way living my own life for reasons I understand. I'm not merely some puppet on neural strings. I agreed whenever I read this, I agreed with him. I felt this way too. When I started reading this article, I thought, wow, I feel weird. It's weird to think we don't know why we're doing something. Truly, we don't know why or why we picked something. I just felt like that was weird. So think about that. How does that make you feel? Do you agree with Brooks? Because we know so little on what drives our behavior, we often fill it with made up stories. We fill these memory gaps with made up stories. Um, Dan, Dan McAdams, who is a professor in psychology and also a non believer in um, self awareness, calls these personal myths. So these stories that we make up to fill in our memory gaps, he calls them personal myths. Um, an example that Brooks gives in the article is a man who is, say, he uses the explanation, oh, I'm horrible at relationships. When in reality, he was dumped and he's not over it. So his explanation, personal myth that he tells is, oh, I'm bad at relationships. When really he was just dumped and he's not over it. As quoted in Brooks, McAdams states, some stories are better than others. Stories that are closer to what really happened are more reliable than the ones that are distorted by self-flattery and self-affirmation. On the other hand, and here's the tension, we want our stories to be positive and affirming. So he suggests when we're unaware of our reasoning, uh, our personal myths may be told to cover up failures, our failures, or to make some of our achievements sound better than they really are. So that is why Dan McAdams feels that we tell our personal myths or made up stories. There are some ideas stated in this article as to why or as to how we can become self-aware. All of them require paying deeper attention to your behavior. As Brooks writes, maybe the best way to see yourself is to get out of the deceptive rumination spirals of your own self-conscious and to think about yourself in the third person. Lori Gottlieb is quoted in this article. She describes this in more detail. The way she describes it is that once you start to notice a pattern in your behavior, so once you realize, oh, I've performed this behavior several times before, once you start to notice the repetition in it, you will then be able to slowly unreveal the reason as to why you behave this way. So that is important. So, in other words, recognizing the patterns of behavior can make you become self-aware and identify your why to these behaviors. In conclusion, although it may be scary that we are not self-aware, this theory may be scary, consider Gottlieb's advice. Wisdom and self-awareness can be attained by recognizing behavior and reality to prevent telling these personal myths. So in this speech, I covered all of the information that Brooks went over in his article, and I went into, I described the theories and other people involved in psychology in his article. Thank you for watching my speech.